how on earth did José Mourinho win the lottery and end up back at the Santiago Bernabeu again?
It's a good question, Mark, but I think there are a lot of reasons, a lot of factors that have contributed to this that mean that when you put all those things together, maybe it shouldn't be as much as a surprise as it seemed when he was first announced. The first thing to say is that Florentino Perez, who of course is the man who makes the decisions at Real Madrid, has always had a huge soft spot for Jose Mourinho. Perez, he's not a big coaches guy. He doesn't really love coaches, doesn't really rate sort of coaches that much. He believes basically buy all the best players, buy the stars, have the best team, and just get someone to pick them. And that tends to be enough. But he's always had a soft spot for Mourinho. The other thing we shouldn't forget, it was a while ago now, almost 15 years ago now, but Mourinho in his first spell at Real Madrid did really, really well. That was a great Real Madrid team, a fun Real Madrid team, an attacking Real Madrid team on the counter-attack. He came in, took on Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, broke records along the way. There was that one season, that famous season in particular, I think it was 2011-2012, where they won the league with a record number of points, a record number of goals scored, beat Guardiola's Barca to the league title. So Mourinho did a really good job in his first spell at Real Madrid. Like I say, okay, it was a while ago now. Now, why has he come back now? I think it was about the options that they had available. Real Madrid, for a long time, the two kind of the heirs to the throne, the next in line in terms of coaches, were Xabi Alonso and Alvaro Arbeloa. And now they went through both of those in the space of a season. Neither worked. And they were sort of looking around for, okay, who's next? A lot of their usual sort of go-tos weren't available. You know, Zinedine Zidane is taking over with France. Of course, Ancelotti left not that long ago. He's with Brazil. And there's been this theme of Real Madrid in recent years of going back to what they know, of familiarity. So like I say, you know, Zidane was there twice. Ancelotti was there twice. They had some homegrown coaches, and now they're going back to Jose Mourinho. Now, like I say, a lot of time has passed since he was last at the Bernabeu. His career has seemed to be, to all of us, to sort of be, you know, in gradual decline in terms of the jobs he's had, in terms of the success he's had. The other big factor I think I've got to mention is that what was the number one problem? I know there were many at Real Madrid last season. I think it was about the dressing room and the complete collapse in discipline. You know, under Xabi Alonso, the first half of the season, it was behind the scenes, wasn't it? You know, we reported about some of the big players that weren't on board in terms of Vinicius and Valverde and Bellingham. By the end of the season, it wasn't behind the scenes. It was all over the front pages with, you know, literally Valverde and Tchouaméni, you know, having a bit of a brawl in the dressing room, and Valverde ended up in hospital. So the discipline in the dressing room was the number one problem. Among others, they wanted to sort out. And in that sense, I think they saw Mourinho as a guy who can sort that out.
That was 14 years ago, Don. What a season it was. They were brilliant to watch. They got 100 points. Ronaldo got 46 goals. Higuain got 22. Benzema got 21. They won 32 out of 38. They only dropped points with 4 draws and 2 defeats. Rather than what's changed at Real Madrid, because we know what they are now, what's changed with Jose Mourinho? What kind of coach is he now compared to what kind of coach he was then?
See, I think that's a fantastic question, because I think it's Florentino Perez is a clever guy, knows what he wants, and Alex has nailed all the problems about that dressing room needs to be pulled into line. And some of these babies on and off the pitch need to be professional footballers. They need to understand that a manager stroke coach is the most important person inside their dressing room, apart from the players, because they need to be a team. That's what Barca are. Now, I hope Perez doesn't feel as though he's getting the Jose of 13 years ago, where he ruled with an iron fist when he took on Villanova and he took on Guardiola, because Jose softened a little bit over the years. Now, Jose's a clever guy as well. He knows what he's doing. He's trying to adapt to the modern pro. The thing I'm struggling with is if Florentino Perez wants this Jose of 13 years ago to come in and really pull Vinny Jr. and Kylian Mbappe and all the guys that Alex has mentioned and completely pull them into line, he's not that guy anymore. He's a softer manager now. He doesn't, even though he might attract the headlines every now and again, I think he's more personable with the younger players that are coming through. I think he's adapting. So I think off the back of Arbeloa, off the back of Xabi Alonso, where the players didn't take to them, and that dressing room has always been political, always, it's going to be very interesting to see how Jose comes in and really commands that dressing room and takes them forward and builds them into a team.
Alex, as someone that covers Real Madrid on a daily basis for ESPN FC. You live and breathe that city, that football club. How much pressure is Perez under? How much pressure is Mourinho under? How much pressure are Real Madrid under not to allow Barca to make it 3 league titles in a row?
Massive. It's massive, Mark, because as you say, it's been 2 years without a major trophy. And that in itself is, if not historic, it hadn't happened for 20 years before these last 2 seasons. So 3 in a row. I mean, look, Florentino's just had elections. Remember, he's just had, just faced opposition in presidential elections for the first time in 20 years. We had an actual election campaign. He came out on top. Part of that was done to kind of shore up his position, I think, and deal with some of that, anticipate a bit of that pressure. But now there's no doubt, despite that, they've got to deliver, and his choices have to deliver in terms of the manager, in terms of the signings, and I'm going to come on to that in a moment. But yeah, there's no doubt, there's no question. Look, Real Madrid, always the imperative is to win, but even more so after 2 years without a trophy. The other thing, just to pick up on what Don said, it's really interesting he says that about the change in Mourinho, because talking to some people who've been talking to people around Valdebebas in the last few weeks, because remember, Mourinho's already at work. He's already got started. Most of the players aren't there, a lot of them, because they have their holidays after the World Cup, but they've been in training. And people are saying that Mourinho he does seem a bit softer. He does seem a bit different. Some of them were worried. Some of the behind the scenes, staff were a bit apprehensive about what kind of Mourinho they were going to get. And they've been surprised as well by a more, maybe softer isn't quite the right word, but yes, certainly a different approach, not quite as abrasive, and not coming in and sort of wanting to tear everything up and start again. So I think that's interesting too.
Don, he's won one trophy since 2017 when he was at Manchester United. That was the Conference League at Roma. Do you think he has it in him, with his ego, to adapt, to allow him to be successful at Real Madrid? Or is it going to continue to be, it's Jose's way, this is the way I do it, this is the way I will continue to do it?
No, he has it. He has it for sure. He has the trophies, he has the aura, he has the reputation, he's a top-class manager. The biggest problem when you look at Real Madrid, and you've watched them over the years, especially, over the last 18 months or so, it's, will the players listen to Jose? Will Jose put a certain player into a position and say to him, I want you to play that position for the team. I know you might prefer another position, but I want you to do it. And by doing that, we will be successful. He's done that with the great Inter Milan side when he played players at a position they won the Champions League. So the egos that he's got to try and deal with, and the signings that they're trying to make, there's a big crop of superstars and big egos to try and deal with. Jose's bigger than all of them. He will behind the scenes be telling the players it's my way or the highway, but still, at Real Madrid, it's never the highway. It's the coach that gets the highway. It's the coach that gets fired first before any player. So this is just a fascinating appointment in terms of who he's succeeding, the job that he's going to try and do, the egos that he's going to try and manage, and then you're up against the top-class Barca side where, as Alex said, the pressure's on. So this, to me, I think is a fascination, and I think it's going to be a brilliant watch.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. It could be brilliant. It could be a car crash. It could be, I don't know if it could be anything in between. It might just be X or Y. But let's put the shoe on the other foot, Alex. Let's say he is successful. Let's say he does win a second trophy for the first time since he was at Manchester United back in 2017. Let's see and say that he does win LaLiga, a second LaLiga at Real Madrid. This is a guy in his 60s now. Could this be a total regeneration of José Mourinho? Could this put him back on the ultimate pedestal if he is successful?
I'm sure that's how he would see it. And let's not forget, he's wanted this, by the way. He's wanted this for a long time. He's almost been sort of, I wouldn't say waiting for this, but I think it's always, every time you've heard him talk about Madrid, even when, of course, they met his Benfica side of the Champions League last season, you could tell it was there. I don't know how possible he ever thought it was, but he wanted this to happen. I think he feels as well. And you understand it. A guy who's achieved everything he has in his career has then had this kind of decline to be back at the top table, with a chance to prove himself once again and say, look, I belong still in this company. That must be massive for him, I think. I mean, look, there are a lot of ifs in your question, and let's see what comes to pass. The other thing, though, look, I think he has been given and is being given the tools to deliver in a way that some of his predecessors weren't. And that was part of his appointment, by the way. Carlo Ancelotti, for example. Ancelotti fairly often would call for a certain type of signing, a certain type of player, and not get it. He wouldn't be listened to. We saw that a bit. Xabi Alonso got 1 or 2 players that he wanted last summer, but previous coaches haven't always been listened to. Part of the appointment process with Mourinho was Mourinho saying, look, I want a say. I want a say in recruitment. I want to be listened to. And we've seen that reflected in Madrid's business so far this summer. You know, players that they, in fact, had previously opted against or ruled out signing, like Bernardo Silva, like Konate. They've signed Cucurella. There are more signings, it looks like, to come. This is looking like, you know, the most active window and a reactive window as well from Real Madrid that we've seen for a while. So I think he's being given the players and the squad to deliver in a way that maybe some of his predecessors, I think they would feel like they weren't necessarily given what they wanted.
Just sticking with you for a second, Alex. Obviously, we've had a change as far as politics is concerned. There's been a big change in the United Kingdom as far as a new prime minister is concerned. But from an election perspective, there's so many people that say, if Perez had, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend loads of money and whatever. Do you think before Real Madrid begin their league campaign or before the transfer window closes, that there will be a fulfillment of that promise from Florentino Perez, that there will be a marquee signing arriving at Real Madrid?
Yeah, it was probably the moment of that election campaign, wasn't it? That 150 million euro promise. It was such a kind of a bombastic sort of thing that it was classic sort of Florentino, classic electioneering, really. Of course, we shouldn't forget that, you know, that what exactly that promise was. It was to bid 150 million euros on a player, and he wouldn't name the player, but he gave us some clues. He said it was, you know, an attacking player. He ruled some names out, and then some names came back into the picture. I think it was electioneering. It was about, you know, responding to pressure, I think, from the opposition candidate and from needing to show that he was still the old Florentino in terms of, you know, still having that mojo and that ability to bring in Galactico signings. I think what we've seen so far has been encouraging, and what we've seen over the last couple of days in particular, in terms of what we're trying to do now, has been really encouraging. It may turn out that 150 million is going to be spent on one player, but maybe more or less on 2, give or take, something like that. You know, some targets have ended up being out of reach and others have come into focus. But like I say, it's already been a busy window. It's looking like over the next day or two, over the next week maybe, being an even busier window. So yeah, I think most Real Madrid fans, I mean, let's see what happens in the next few days if the players that are being talked about come in. But I think most Madrid fans would feel like, okay, this is Florentino delivering on his promises.
Yeah, we'll get to the potential new signings shortly. But Don, all Perez can say is, hey, I did make a 150 million bid for Julian Alvarez. I've kept my promise, because that's what politicians do. They'll find a way to do that. But he's in power now. Of the managers, and this is a difficult one, because Alex has been speaking about Mourinho's been in there for a few weeks now, getting his feet back under the desk, and a lot of the players are now coming back from the World Cup. Was Perez in a situation, Don, that he couldn't really wait to see which managers might become available after the World Cup? Because as Alex said, Mourinho, he's worked with him before, he knows what he's or was capable of. Do you think they made the right decision to appoint José Mourinho rather than potentially wait and see who else is out there?
No, I think it was the perfect appointment for Perez, because, as I said, it's trying to get a guy in that's got aura, who's powerful, who's brave enough to take on the dressing room and pull them into line. I think it was the obvious choice. I think it was probably Perez's first option. What I would say is, we talk about Jose being a little bit softer than what he was. I commentated on his Roma side about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were terrible. And he was awful. When I say they, I mean his behaviour. On the touchline, he was arguing with referees. He was getting sent off. He had his coaching staff picking fights with the opposition players and staff, and he was getting sent off. It felt like every 5 minutes, trying to pull headlines in, maybe deflecting away from his team. So hopefully that's something we're not going to see when we talk about La Liga and the race for the title this year with Barca and Real Madrid. It's not going to be about Jose on the front pages. Hopefully it's going to be all about the noise on the back pages. And getting into the signings, if we want to now, I think there's one player at the moment where I still think, as we sit here now, Barca are favourites. But if they got the one player in, I think it would totally transform that dressing room if they can get him with 1 year left on his contract. And that's Rodri, who for me was the best player at the World Cup by far. And he's a player that would knit everything together. For me, would make them then favourites.
If I was to tell you, Alex, that when Hansi Flick, the Barca coach, and José Mourinho, the Real Madrid coach, met before it wasn't a 9-goal thriller, but it was a game that featured 9 goals. Could you remember what the game was when Flick met Mourinho?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd have to think about it. Go on, tell me. I've got no idea.
Tottenham Hotspur 2, Bayern Munich 7 in October.
That's a game I really should remember. I feel like that should have been, I would have enjoyed that one. Sorry, carry on.
In the Champions League. So we've got Flick and we've got Mourinho, contrasting styles, contrasting people and individuals as well. Don's just spoken about the old Mourinho compared to the new Mourinho. What are we going to get? Are we going to get histrionics and antics? Are we going to get a little bit more respect? And especially when it's Flick against Mourinho, what do you think we'll get when the first Clásico takes place in a couple of months?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because I talk about Mourinho having maybe softened, internally in terms of the dynamics with the players and with the staff at Valdebebas, but that's different to what you're going to get on the touchline, isn't it? And also the fact that he hasn't been out of the spotlight because he's still been in demanding jobs. When he's at Fenerbahce in Turkey, that's a demanding, high-pressure job. Even, within the Portuguese context, being back at Benfica was also a high-profile job there. But this is another level. This is, the ultimate spotlight. You mentioned the Clásico, the biggest game in the world. And I wonder, for all that we say that, yes, he may have, I don't know about mellowed, but he may have matured and changed. It's still Jose Mourinho. And I still think, the histrionics that you mentioned and the touchline drama, it's hard for me to imagine, Mourinho coaching Real Madrid in a Clásico and not getting quite a bit of that. Hansi Flick, look, he's not the most combustible character on the sidelines, but he's not the calmest either. He's not a Carlo Ancelotti. We have seen it get a bit heated with Flick on the touchline as well. So let's see. I think there'll be sparks. Whether there'll be full-blown fireworks, I'm not sure, but sparks for sure.
I think it's got a red card written all over it. It's got a Jose or a Real Madrid Cucurella, someone getting a red card.
And Jose Mourinho acting as the peacemaker. That would be an interesting narrative. I did some digging, and 6 years ago, Jose Mourinho was actually on Hansi Flick's side. Maybe it's because him and Klopp don't really get along, but he was the one that said he felt Hansi Flick should have been the FIFA Coach of the Year rather than Jurgen Klopp. I think that was then, and this is now.